right, everybody. Hey, what a crowd. Thanks for packing the room today. The romance of the rails never fails. Welcome to the Family Business Initiative's Leadership Speaker Series. We are so thrilled to have you here with us. This is the fourth year of the Family Business Initiative Leadership Speaker Series. And the Family Business Initiative has a few layers to it. We have a graduate level course in the Tepper School. And I think we have some of those students here with us today. In fact, Shreyas is a student in that course right now. We also have a family business peer advising group, and I know we have some of our peer advisory group members here with us today. And Leif Johnson is the program manager for the Family Business Initiative. And if you're interested in learning more about the peer advising groups, where we welcome in business owners from the Pittsburgh community as well as the Carnegie Mellon global community to come together every month for facilitated sessions, Leif is also a family business owner and CEO, would love to talk with you more about that. So what we're here though today to talk about is the Posner's family business. And we are so thrilled to do so. So I'm going to introduce our dean, Dean Isabelle Bajou, who is the 10th dean of the Tepper School of Business and also the Richard P. Simmons Professor of Finance. And she is going to introduce our speakers today. Let's give her a round of applause. I'm sorry, one more note before we get started. Instead of a moment of silence, if we could take a moment of crinkle. If you have a lunch in front of you that you have not yet opened, if you would please open everything in it. Open the sandwich, open the chips. You might think you aren't going to have the cookie, that you're saving it for later. You're going to eat it. Just open it now. Everyone take a moment now, open everything up. All right, good work. All right, thank you. Dean Bajou.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Meredith. And I never heard moment of crinkle, but I love it. So thanks, everybody, for being here. It's amazing to see a full room here. I would like to say welcome to the Family Business Initiative session today. And this is an initiative that is between the Tepper School and the Schwartz Center. So we're very happy with this initiative and all of the amazing speakers that we've been able to bring, in particular, among other activities. This session is going to highlight a multi-generational family business that has evolved across industries and across continents. We're very honored to welcome Henry Posner and Ida Posner of the Railroad Development Corporation, a family-led business that has shaped rail transportation around the world. And I can tell you, I was born in France, I was raised in France, and railroad is very important in Europe, way more than it is here in the US these days. Together, they represent both. It's okay. As long as everybody's safe, it's all good. Together, they represent both the legacy and the future of the organization. It's a real powerful example of succession and shared leadership in action. I would like to share actually about railroad a personal story. So, as I said, you know, I was born in France. My grandfather actually was working for the French railroad. He was blue collar, he was fixing trains. And he was always telling me the stories of what happened during World War II in France, when instead of fixing trains, he was actually bombing trains. And these were trains coming from Germany with all of the munitions that was coming to France. And that's a story that is very dear to my heart. And I remember his funeral when all the resistance were there and singing resistance songs. Very powerful story, and it actually personally links me a lot to railroads and trains. So I would like now to introduce Henry Posner. Henry Posner is the chairman and founder of Railroad Development Corporation, established in 1987. His distinguished railway career began at Amtrak and Conrail. When he built Railroad Development Corporation into a global organization with operations in the US, Europe, and Latin America. Henry is a graduate of Princeton University and the Wharton School, and that's okay. Beyond business, Henry is deeply engaged in education, philanthropy, and civic leadership. He's the president of the EBT Foundation. He's the co-chair of the Surface Transportation Board's Passenger Rail Advisory Committee, and maybe most importantly, he is a teacher at Carnegie Mellon University. And he's teaching our undergraduate students about railways, and these are students that are coming from all across the university, including TEPA students. Ida Posner serves as Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of the Railroad Development Corporation. She oversees internal operations and strategic initiatives across multiple continents. Her leadership also extends beyond business. She's the founder and managing partner of Hawthorne Food Ventures. She's a trustee of the Posner Foundation of Pittsburgh, and she's a board member of REFED. She holds degrees from Princeton University and Columbia Business School. That's also okay. Together, Henry and Ida exemplify what it means to lead across generations. It's a balance of tradition with transformation. At this time, I would like to invite MBA student Sher Is Chu Voon up to interview Henry and Ida. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm sure we all have a great deal to learn from both of your experiences. So coming into that vein a little bit, I'd love for you both to introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about your backgrounds and what led you to where you are today.
Okay, well, I'll start, but the reason you learn is through failure. Spoiler alert. And I'm old enough that I have failed a lot in my life, which means I've learned a lot. But I think it's important to put this all in perspective. So if you're at CMU, you are no doubt aware that there are several buildings on campus with the name Posner on them. And in fact, just today, the new Posner Center opened with its first class, which I just happened to be able to be there for, which is fabulous. But I'm third generation business, first generation railroad. My grandfather, Henry Posner Sr., came from Poland, started a billboard company. My father, Henry Posner Jr., diversified that into a number of businesses. He described himself as a business person. So it was from that platform that I was in the position of being able to become a multi-generational business person. And we can talk about that some more. But just so you're aware, when you see the buildings on campus with the Posner name, that was my grandfather and my father. I just teach here. I think it's also important to note that my wife, Ann Malloy, Ida's mother, is here with us. She's vice chair of the CMU board, and that explains in part how we have been sucked into the vortex that is CMU. Many levels, very complex story. And finally, Isabel, it is an honor for me to be considered a cheminot. As a railroader in France, I'm well aware of the important role that the French railway workers played during the resistance. And I think it's only Ukraine where you've got a similar thing going on, where railway people have been so much in the front lines of a conflict. So I will stop with that. And I think the objective from here on should be Ida will do at least half the talking, and I'm going to try to stay out of her way and provide color as appropriate. Except to point out that since this is a railroad-related group, I'll give you a safety briefing. That's the emergency exit. That's the way out. Anytime we start a meeting, railroad people, safety culture, you always start with a safety briefing. You've just had one. Thank you.
Thanks, Henry. I thought it was going to be a comment on the comparison between our French trains and U.S., but we'll get to that one.
That's later.
Thanks, everyone. It's so great to be here and to have so many people here. So I'll give a little more context for RDC, maybe for my entry point into the business. It's a question I get a lot, and a little bit more on kind of the family over the years. So as Henry mentioned, I'm fourth generation in the broader business. We haven't had one operating company throughout those 4 generations. So moving from an outdoor advertising billboard company through my grandfather's era, which was more about industry agnostic investments in a partnership model. So anything from a Pepsi bottling franchise, cable news and television. There's the successful ones. The more interesting failures included a shipbuilding business, Thompson Trawlers, and some other ones that were fascinating failures, which are rabbit holes we don't have time for today. And when Henry joined the business, his passion has always been railroads. And not just trains, railroads, which is the industry. So we're not just talking about the locomotives, we are talking about the rail industry overall. My background, I studied environmental engineering undergrad. I lived abroad for a bit in Kenya, and then I worked in San Francisco for a foundation doing environmental work. So not necessarily the most linear path towards joining a family business. But I grew up around it. And so when I was younger, we had the privilege of taking many family trips. We don't take vacations, we take trips. They normally involve long walks and early mornings and a little bit of adventure, but we were able to travel to a lot of the places that RDC had business. So I certainly had a lot of exposure growing up to the rail industry. And I think it's important maybe to set a little more framework here. When we talk about the railroad industry, for us, it's mainly been on the freight side. So while most people, their experience with trains are on a passenger train, and in the US that'd be Amtrak, obviously in Europe there's much more developed passenger systems. In North America, we actually have the most robust and the best freight rail network in the world. And so while we may look at Europe and say, wish we had passenger trains like they do, the rest of the world looks at the United States and says, wow, wish we had freight trains like they do. Which again, lots of complexity there. And so in 2016, was Peru 2016? Henry and I hadn't done a trip together for a long time. We were overdue for some adventure, and we went down to Peru to visit our railroad there, which is the second highest in the world by elevation. The line to Tibet beat it out a few years back. And it's not the train to Machu Picchu. Again, it's the freight line that goes up into the Andes, a lot of mining clients. And for me, it was the first time I was just thrown into a true railroad operating environment. And I think we're going to have a video that we're going to play at some point that can kind of roll in the background whenever. But we went intentionally during the rainy season, which is when the railroad is at its most stressful point. And every year, El Nino comes in and wipes out giant chunks of this railroad. And you'll get a visual in a second, but it is truly cut into the side of the mountains. And so you have switchbacks and tunnels, and it is one of the most intense railroad operating environments you can have. And every year, pieces of the mountain fall out, and every year they put it back together. And so we were there for about 3 days of that, getting to see our team in what some might call a crisis, others might just say was a challenging day, and to see how they were able to put it back together, get the operation up and running, and then to visually see what that meant for the local economy, for the people who were in the region, and how critical the railroad really is to not just that region of Peru, but the entire national economy. And so that, for me, sparked interest in learning a little bit more. I joined RDC in 2017, and that's been about 8.5 years. And it's a fascinating industry. I've loved getting to know it. It's one that you need to be curious and always willing to learn and never kind of be complacent with what you know. But it is a fascinating and I'd say not as, maybe a little misunderstood. People don't really think about trains as much, but we think about them all the time. So that's a little bit about RDC. Did I miss anything?
I think you captured it quite well. Just keep in mind, we went to Peru. I just said we should go on a train trip. So I said, well, you're the environmental engineer. Let's go to Peru during the rainy season and see what happens. And so what you're going to see is a video, if we are ready to...
Not quite ready.
Okay, so let's hold that thought, and let's come back to the trigger moment for your entry into railroading when we're able to cue up the video, because this is interesting at a number of levels, including, like, you're in Pittsburgh. Okay, we tolerate a bridge being out for a number of years. That's just who we are. Take a look at what we have to do to get our railroad back in a number of days. And not to get too ideological on the crowd, but that might have something to do with us being the private sector as opposed to the public sector. Just hold that thought. So why don't we go to the next set of questions, then we'll come back to the Peru video.
Okay, yeah, those were some very varied perspectives. It also kind of really highlights the importance of business being multi-generational, kind of being able to draw on those experience. Building on that a little bit, RDC has kind of thrived in an industry where consolidation has often pushed out family ownership. What do you think were the unique factors, whether that be strategic or cultural, that allowed your family to stay independent and relevant?
So I think one of the challenges these days for family-owned businesses is, one of the strengths is that you can take a long-term perspective. But it's becoming increasingly hard to do that when we live in this very distracting, fast-paced, chaotic environment. And there's real pressure to figure out what to do in the next 6 months, in the next year. And it's hard to think about the next 10 years, the next 20 years. I feel lucky that I entered an environment that was already multi-generational, so it was that base was there, right? You know, I'm coming into this having seen it transition over a few generations. And so what's remained constant for us has been a model based on partnerships, which Henry can talk a little bit more about. I describe that as we think more about who we're working with than what we're actually doing. And obviously with RDC, we have a very specific focus in the rail industry, but if you look at historically what we've done, it's much more about who we're working with than the actual business we're in. And I also think that on the cultural piece, we are, how did I describe it the other day? We're above average at showing up places. I mean, we will go check out something that no one else would even go to that region or country. We'll pick up the phone. We're very open to new ideas and new opportunities in a way that, again, has been consistent over time, but is differentiating versus other firms. And so both that love of learning and curiosity and wanting to do new things and thinking about who we're partnering with has really been an asset for us. And as you look across the rail industry right now, the final thing I'll note is that there's a lot of financial pressure. And so you're seeing a lot of people, Henry's course at CMU will teach you about the Staggers Act, which was passed in 1980 and deregulated the industry, which created a generation of entrepreneurs in the rail industry. Many of them are starting to age out right now. So specific to the North American short-line rail freight industry, we're seeing a lot of that turnover. And so you have options. You can sell your business. You can find your next generation. And so that transition is happening right now. We're taking a long-term approach to it, but there's a lot of financial pressure for others to make different decisions.
Yeah, and I think it's also a very long-term business. A railroad is not something that just happens. Quite often, and for the most part, and 99% of railroads in the U.S. are over 100 years old. First of all, you never get permission to build anything like our industry today. So a lot of the industry is about recycling and restructuring it. In our case, the Iowa Interstate Railroad was actually an abandoned railroad from Chicago to Omaha because everybody says, oh, you don't need 4 main lines from Chicago to Omaha. Well, we've proven that thing wrong. But to the extent that this is CMU and you've got this high energy and you see stuff happen right in front of you, we are, relatively speaking, a slow motion industry. Except that the structural change occurs with amazing speed. And so the assets that you're working with may have been built with manual labor in the mid-1800s. The ownership may change at a moment's notice. And that's what makes it so exciting, because you have, for example, this railroad from Chicago to Omaha, which is abandoned for 4 years. and all of a sudden it comes back, and there are several layers of ownership, and stuff happens along the way. The shareholder structure is kind of like an amoeba. You know, the pieces of the amoeba break apart and then they come back together again, and here we are. If you're in the industry today, you're either looking at who your owners are going to be or what's your market going to be a couple years from now. And so the pace of that change is very multidimensional, but it's also very stressful. And one of the things I think that's been driving it is people suffer from burnout, and more to the point, they haven't got a succession plan. You've worked all your life and created something that's valuable. And do you keep fighting, or do you sell for a fat profit? Well, fortunately, we're not in that position because we have a multi-generational thing going on. And we can talk about that more, especially in the Q&A. So please keep in mind that we like pointed questions. We did not come here to catch softballs. So think of the most hostile, pointed question you can possibly come up with.
And Henry
Don't
will answer
filter it. And then Ida will answer it. and I will back her up on it. And what you'll probably hear are two slightly different answers of the same question, which is how it works.
Okay, with the
Play the
railroad.
dramatic video.
The video is ready.
Okay, I'm gonna get out of the way so you can see it.
Yeah.
Narrate. Okay, so imagine you are in the Andes of Peru. What's our elevation here?
So this particular location, we're probably about 7,500 feet. So landslides come down, blocked up the valley, the water breaks, kind of like the Johnstown flood. And so in this valley, you got the road on one side and the railroad on the other. So this is like day one. 4,000 trucks. What are the truck drivers doing? Sitting in the hillside. They got no place to go, no place to turn.
And that
So they're
water's the
watching us.
highway.
And what are we
Was the
doing?
highway.
We're out there with machinery putting the railroad back. So let's go through that once more, if we could repeat it. I'll show you all the really good parts, because I don't know if you noticed, Ida's there. So on the other side of the river, that's where the road is. It's just under all the water. This is the railroad right here. The yellow machines are ours, but we loan them out to local contractors. So there's Ida. Okay. But by the way, the reason we're there, the guy in the dark glasses, Dr. Juan de Diaz Olechea, our Peruvian partner. We would not be there if it was not for the partnership with Dr. Juan de Diaz Olechea. So that'll give you an idea of what was the trigger point for what happened when Ida said, let's go for a train trip. And I said, oh, you're the civil engineer, you're the environmental engineer, let's go to Peru and see what happens during the rainy season. So that'll give you some flavor.
All right. Thank you.
So you mentioned a little bit about the pace of change being relatively slow in the railroad industry. So family-owned companies often walk a fine line between preserving legacy and embracing change. How do you think about that balance? What stays constant and what has to continue to evolve?
So in family-owned businesses, your reputation is your brand. It is something that, as I've been in the business, 8+ years now, it's honestly a different level of stress, right? If you're in a job that's not a family business and you really don't like it or you disagree and you leave, that's obviously really difficult, but you can kind of walk away from it in a way that you can't in a family business, and that's really both an asset because you can really build up a lot of value and respect over years, and you get to build on that legacy that came before you. The flip side is you got to be careful, and you have to make sure that you are maintaining that. And so I think one of the things that we've done well, I like to think that we've done well, is having a consistent story and being who we are and being able to be open and transparent and good partners, and really have that be what we lead with. What changes is everything else. And as Henry said, I mean, there's no lack of change. I think the change is increasing at a rapid pace these days. And so it's kind of doing it in parallel, right? keeping constant with who you are and how you show up, and acknowledging you can't control everything and the change is going to be there, and sometimes that's uncomfortable. And I think that our ability to bring in different perspectives and people who can help us keep up with that change is really important. We're very lucky that we've had a lot of long-term employees, both with RDC and the broader family business, which again is a huge asset. It also means that when someone leaves, it's really hard to replace them. It means that it's really hard to make new hires because you're bringing someone into a close-knit organization, and personalities really matter. And so, again, it's both assets and challenges here, but overall, I'd say being able to show up as a consistent message, be who we are, has been what's allowed us to navigate all the change.
Yeah, and it really does depend on who your partners are. So if you look at, there are more places that we aren't anymore. It's like Pittsburgh, where stuff used to be. So we used to be in Guatemala, Argentina, Colombia, Chile, Mozambique, Malawi, and Estonia. How did we wind up there? Well, at the time, we had partnerships in each of those countries, and what happened to those businesses largely depended on who the partners were. So now, we're in the USA, Peru, France, Germany, and the UK. But it keeps on changing, but it heavily depends on who your partners are. So where's the partnership model come from? Well, that came from my father. So he inherited the billboard business from his father, had a single business. That one business was targeted by the government. There was a time when the First Lady of the USA, Lady Bird Johnson, was the most anti-billboard person in the world. And so when you're targeted by the president's wife, you need to have a plan B. And as a result of that, he perfected the business model of partnerships. And it's that DNA which you will find in our railroad businesses. It's more about who your partners are than what the business is. Because better to be in a bad business with good partners, because you make it better, than to be in a good business with bad partners, because you'll always be fighting over what you think is the pot of gold.
Okay, and how has being in Pittsburgh impacted the culture of RDC?
I can't always start. You get this one.
Well, we got thrown out of Pittsburgh in 1990, and we have no business interests here. That's the bad news. We were going to do a bunch of things. One was save our local railroad, the P&LE. But as it turned out, that opened all kinds of doors for us. So you could say being located in Pittsburgh had a tremendous impact on the arc of RDC. But the end result was we have no business interests here. We've never been allowed to invest in Pittsburgh or Pennsylvania. But on the other hand, we've done a lot of other stuff.
And when you think about the family side of it, there is so much history here that, again, when you think about the long-term legacy, you can't separate that out from the actual operating businesses. And so, consistent story. That's been Pittsburgh as well. It's been consistent.
Okay, yeah, I'm sure you've gotten a lot of different perspectives from various people in Pittsburgh and out. Coming to some of the perspectives within the business, right? Running a family business often means bringing a lot of different perspectives to the same mission. So what's some of the things that you implicitly agree upon as leaders, and what are some of the things that you completely disagree on? How do you manage those moments and keep moving forward together?
So let's talk about the disagreements, which is more fun, and I think quickly provides a greater insight. What are the biggest things we disagree about? And I don't know what she's going to say. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure what I'm going to say, but that gives me 30 seconds to think about it.
Yeah, he wants time to think.
Yeah.
I mean, we disagree about a lot, and that is a strength. That's something we intentionally try to have. If we have a board meeting and everyone's agreeing, that's not a productive meeting. We're intentionally bringing in different perspectives, and we want people to disagree with us. We want to have disagreement with each other. That's normally about specific business opportunities, and I'm more of a planner. Henry's more opportunistic. So even little things with how we're planning a work trip to Germany, we might, have a couple disagreements on. how much we can pack into one day and how many trains we're going to ride. But I'd say overall, if you come back to the kind of values alignment, there's that the base is there. But no, we disagree about things all the time, and I think there's, even one of the most important things is when I will sometimes tend to have a quicker reaction, and Henry's really good at being calm. I mean, his line is, I'll say, did you see that headline, that news article? He's like, no, I'll read about it in The Economist next week. Which these days, it's nice to kind of have that moderating force, and sometimes you do need to read the news a little more frequently, I think. But we're able to balance each other out with how reactive do we need to be versus, okay, let's take a breath and think about, what's really happening here. And most of our job these days is relationship management, both internally and with our partners and in the industry. And we spend a lot of time doing things that are good for the industry, that we hope benefit us, but are really industry first. And so there's a lot of alignment as well, not a lot of disagreement.
Yeah, so the rail industry is a network industry. Most rail freight traffic involves 3 or 4 or more railroads that all need to cooperate. So as a network industry, we are a lot different than, for example, the web, which is, it's binary, or you in or out. This is more like a chain where the weakest link in the chain defines whether you can compete with trucks or not. And sometimes we're our own worst enemy, but if you take my course, you will learn the difference between shopping for a price on an airline versus constructing logistics chains in which railroads compete with our ultimate regulator. And the ultimate regulator of railroads is trucks.
Yeah.
Did I answer the question, or did I go down too many rabbit holes?
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, pointed questions, just like you wanted. But yeah, so you mentioned, there's a lot of, I can imagine, very different scenarios, different markets in different countries all over the world. And with RDC operating on a global scale, what are some of the challenges and what has motivated expansion beyond the US? What are some of the challenges of leading a family enterprise with international reach?
Yeah, it's a lot. On any given day, we're looking at businesses that have operations in France, Germany, the UK, Peru, US, multiple regions within the US. Henry's got 35 years on me with institutional knowledge, so I'm never really going to keep up with that. I think.
And I would not recommend it.
And then in addition to RDC, as we were mentioning earlier, I also do some investing in food and ag and have other roles. And so we all are pretty good at managing a lot of different things at once. I personally, I'm learning to be better at delegating and building capacity and not feeling like you have to be the expert on everything you're doing, because when you have as broad of a scope as we do, you can't be. At the same time, I want to be, because that's my personality. So, that's a tension you're kind of always navigating. And the simple answer is you build a good team and you have people to support you, and you build those relationships where you can pick up the phone and call someone and have them give you a readout of what's going on, or have someone you can call to send in when someone needs support. And so it's a balance. I'll say what is fun about it is we're curious people. And so most days, most weeks, I get to think about all kinds of really interesting questions and be in these different environments and learn about different cultures and political systems and economies. And that phrase, every day's a school day, that's so true for the work that we do. And if you don't have that mentality, I would not recommend doing our jobs. But it's been really fun, and I said earlier we're above average at showing up. We learn a lot by doing, and so that's why we are traveling constantly. We want to be on the ground with our partners. We want to understand what's happening with the business. We want to understand who are the people who are actually there, and then that normally yields other opportunities that you wouldn't see if you were just kind of sitting at home on Zoom.
Yeah, and it has reached the point where, if you know enough people and you failed enough in different environments, you pretty much know everybody in the world of railways. And so what we find is that there are lots of situations where we can connect the dots conceptually in a way that nobody else can, in part because there are so few people out there doing what we do. And what we find is that if you have a problem in one continent, that sometimes that solution can apply in a place where you never thought of it. Great example, network modeling. So in the 1970s, when the rail industry was being restructured and the last gasp of railroading, Conrail, before the whole thing was going to collapse, was being modeled. There was a network model that was developed by my Princeton professor, Alan Kornhauser. And that model had never been used in Europe. And so it was used in the 1970s to basically help restructure the rail freight industry in the USA. We took it to France in the year 2010 and applied it in a way that had never been used in the continent of Europe. Well, you get this famous network model, and it's famous at the industry level, but nobody in Europe is using it. Okay, well, we create a little bit of value there. And we also answered some very important questions, which ultimately had some impact on how things went down on the freight rail industry in France.
Okay, thank you so much for taking out the time to answer the questions, and really great perspectives here, and I think we all have a lot to learn. I now wanted to move it to the audience so that they can answer their burning questions regarding the railroad industry, regarding your experiences. So yeah, would love to, if you have any questions, please raise your hand. I saw you in the back there. Raise your hand first.
And if you would, YJ, just let us get to you so that we can capture via the video.
Yeah, and so the rule is Ida answers first. That's the deal.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is YJ. I'm a first-year MBA student. My burning question is this. You talked about how you built, or in multiple generations, each generation built another chapter to your legacy and the story that your family has been able to grow this business. My question is, when it comes to building succession plans, how do you balance and how do you go about with making sure that, is it teaching your successor to continue to run the business or empowering them to continue to build upon it? What are some best practices when it comes to creating these succession plans, and what do people usually get wrong about creating those?
That's a fantastic question. I will start, you can add. So a couple themes I like to talk about around succession. One is it's really hard when you're entering an industry. Henry is so well respected in the industry. He knows everyone. He knows everything about railroads. I will never get to that level. It's just not possible. He's, not human. Fun fact, 23andMe rejected his DNA twice. So he's actually, unclear whether he really is human or not. Putting that aside, that's probably a HIPAA violation. So I think, when I entered the industry, there's a big shadow there, right? And even in my first year, I remember everyone kind of treated me as it was, bring your daughter to work day. And so it takes a long time. I mean, it took me, I'd say like 5 years to really learn the rail industry and feel like I could confidently walk into a room and, show up really as myself and not as Henry's daughter. One thing that we started doing from day one, when I'm in a work setting, this is Henry. When we're at home, it's dad. And that just helps me kind of mentally switch between the two. But that's a little off topic. So succession planning. First of all, it takes so much longer than you think. It's a constant process. It's not just identifying someone and saying, great, we have a plan, check the box. I mean, you can look at Warren Buffett to see, if you want to see the ultimate example of long-term succession planning. And for me personally, so my core role is with RDC. In parallel, I have interests in food and agriculture. And so over the past few years, I've started to build out a new area of investment for the firm in solutions for food waste, because not so fun fact, we waste 40% of the food we produce globally, and it's a huge problem and a huge opportunity. And so having that piece of work that is really my own, and Henry is an investment committee member for that fund, and we work very closely on it, but that's something that I'm really building out kind of with my core vision. I thought that was going to be something that grew into my bigger thing that I was working on. What it actually did was make me really appreciate and realize how much I love the rail industry. So now I'm like, well, how do I do both? You have 2 jobs at once, and so we're figuring that out. It's a journey. But I think I've been lucky to have flexibility within the family business framework to say, you're in the business, you're committed to it. That doesn't mean it has to look the same for the next 35 years. And that goes back to that theory of there is constant change, you have to be evolving. And so even with a leadership transition, I think it's about figuring out what that successor is interested in, what their passions are, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, where you need to build other people to support around them. And so it's not a static process, it's very dynamic.
Yeah, and within our family, succession planning has been traumatic. There's a story about the time my father fired his grandfather. My father fired my grandfather. So from generation to generation, it's traumatic. But as you widen the funnel of things people can do, if you give people space to evolve based on who they are within the organization, quite often they'll gravitate in a certain way, which may in fact achieve the desired result without having to force it. So I would argue, and Ida, in your case, you started with a couple things right out of the box. One, appreciation for railroads. Two, an ideological commitment to, for example, the environment. And three, sense of curiosity and fun, which you got from both of your parents. And that's what worked for your generation. But you can't force somebody to take over a family business very well. That usually ends badly. And it also ends badly when people don't get out of the way for the next generation. So what you see here is a transition process where there's stuff going on, and yeah, it used to be the Henry Show, and now it's the Ida and Henry Show. And if you go to a rail conference, the best evidence of how successful we've been on this is half the people want to talk to Ida, half the people want to talk to me. Or if you don't like me, talk to Ida. I mean, I've never been anybody who doesn't like Ida, but theoretically, they could talk to me. So I think we're in the middle of this transition, which is occurring very naturally, and so far so good.
Awesome, thank you.
Hello, I'm Denny. I'm in the Family Business Initiative. Thank you very much for your time today. In the spirit of difficult, possibly inappropriate questions, I wanted to throw a scenario out at you guys and see what you think. Imagine that you had to sell off, like you were talking about, different ownership of different railroads. Imagine that you had to sell off all of your existing railroad assets, and you could only invest in one of the major North American Class I railroads, and you had to hold that investment for 15 years. Which one would it be and why, like in terms of the character and competence of management, and also like the franchise and network characteristics of those Class I railroads? Thank you.
I have to answer first. Well, for those of you not following rail industry drama right now, there's a big potential merger afoot between Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern. And we're purely doing this based on like stock price, public markets, not like character test of management, things like that.
No, you could use management character
Yeah.
competence as part of it.
Okay. This is a tough question.
Yeah, because you're asking us to make comments about the character of the leadership of some major railroad companies with whom we have connections. And in a network industry where it's all relationship-based, what you don't want to do is have any of the major railroads disagreeing with you in any way. And so the easy answer is, I agree with everything that anyone from a Class I railroad has said or thought in his or her life. That being said, do you want to take that one? I mean, I can continue.
You go ahead.
Okay. So, I mean, the financial marketplace is what it is. You take a random walk down Wall Street, and unless you know something that nobody else knows, investing in a basket of railroads is almost as good as coming up with some insider perspective on what might be. At least before AI came along. And in all the excitement, I'm not sure how this is all going to work out, except that what it may also do is drive some more extreme decision making, which might have either smoothing consequences or catastrophic consequences. But I think in the next several years, we're going to see some creeping influence of AI in our industry. We just don't know what form it's going to take and if it will be overestimated or underestimated. But remember what I said earlier, these assets are over 100 years old. Who owns them? Who slices them up? That's the really exciting part. And the good news is, because we haven't sold out, we have a seat at the table. So who here watches Gilded Age? Anybody here seen the TV show Gilded Age?
Oh, come on, it's so
Come
good.
on. Okay, well, go to YouTube and look at the opening for Gilded Age. And there's a train steaming across the prairie, and there's a pile of stock certificates. And the top name on that pile of stock certificates is the Mississippi and Missouri Railroad, which Ida and I own. How cool is that?
Lots of history. And maybe one final comment on the class ones, which is, I don't watch their stock prices and play that game. Though we'll be at an industry conference in New York later in the week where all the CEOs speak, which will be very interesting. I would bet on the long-term success of the industry. I think quarter to quarter, year to year, there is a lot of noise. And it's hard to kind of say, oh, you're going to pick one, but I think overall I would bet on the rail industry, which doesn't help you, I guess, with actually making an investment. But yeah, tune into Rail Trends, and we'll hear more on Friday and hear more about this merger that's afoot.
Any further questions?
Thank you for your talk. It's really interesting. My question is, what exactly is hamstringing your business in Pennsylvania?
Railroad opportunities are very lumpy, so it's, they come across when they do, and they are also very tied to stakeholders and decision makers and having a champion in whatever region you're in. So, even as recently we've looked at some smaller, maybe transit-related opportunities, they're just very complicated, and you need a lot of factors to line up. And historically, there just haven't been that many. That Henry was mentioning kind of the original one that didn't happen, but there just aren't that many opportunities because they are so lumpy and large.
Yeah, and I'll give you a slightly different answer. Was the problem with Pennsylvania is there's too much money, and everybody's got an agenda. By the way, what do we hear out there? Too much money in Pennsylvania, conflicting agendas, et cetera. Okay, so out the window, the railroad is owned by CSX. It's used by Amtrak on its way from Chicago to Pittsburgh to Washington. And the freight service is provided by the Allegheny Valley Railroad. So we have this fabulous example of how this inscrutable, opaque industry is these layers and layers of really, really interesting interactions. The one comment I'll make about that is there's a grade crossing down there, and one of my class projects was we've tried to figure out a way to reduce trespassing around the railroad tracks. But we have a living example of a mainline railroad literally running right through the CMU campus. I don't know of many academic institutions that are blessed with having a Class 1 railroad running right through their campus. Congratulations to all of us.
I'm Jill Simmons. I work here in University Advancement. It's so interesting to hear you talk about this as a relationship business. And I'm questioning, I'd love to hear how you choose your partners. Even if it's a bad business, you said you need to have good partners. So I'm interested to hear what your process is.
Our process. I mean, a lot of it is, again, spending time out in the real world with people. When we brought on our partners for the Iowa Interstate, we have a minority partner, which is an infrastructure fund. That was a relationship that we knew them for, 3 years before we did that? And had gone to visit some of their other businesses, met the people they worked with. But more broadly, I'd say a lot of this comes from, it's a network industry. You meet someone who knows someone else and making sure that you're getting proper references and understanding who people are. I'd say we like to kind of pressure test relationships, and that normally happens. Like if you're considering a new partnership or new business, generally as you're going through the diligence or startup process, there's going to be some stressful moments. We put a lot of focus on those, and how did that go? And how can we extrapolate from that what might happen down the road? I personally always struggle with, especially this is not in the rail world, but in the venture world, you're making decisions on a pretty accelerated timeline to get to an investment. And that's when the real work starts, right? So you've done even 3 months of work, and then all of a sudden you're in it for 5-6 years. And so it's kind of impossible up front to know everything, but making sure that you are, to the earlier conversation around like disagreement and different viewpoints, make sure you're getting to at least one point of friction before you're really building a partnership with someone, and then it's just that long-term relationship approach.
I just add, who your partners are is more important than the business. So this is, in my course, there are 2 textbooks. This is one, this is our history. It obviously needs to be rewritten because this is before Ida joined us. But there's a lot of stuff in here about partnerships, including some stuff about my grandfather and especially my father's business philosophy. But choosing your partner is the absolute single most important determination of success, I would argue, in any business and in life. And how many weeks did we date before we got engaged?
The answer is 7.
So we dated for 7 weeks before we got engaged. We've been married for 43 years. So. But we were pressure tested because we'd worked together at Conrail. Just saying.
Hi. Is Ida an only child? And if so, if not, how did you navigate the relationship between siblings and her coming on board to help manage the family business?
Okay, so let me answer that. So the guy who's holding the mic, the gentleman right there, we got time for a question from him also. I'll do this really quickly. Ida was the only person who put her hand up. 3 kids, 1 decided to go railroading. Other 2 kids have their own lives.
Yeah, well, and I'll just add, with any family business, doesn't matter if you're a 3-person family, a 30-person family, it's complicated, and that takes real work too. I mean, these relationships internally, I spend a lot of time working on family relationships, and that is part of the job. I have a great coach. I highly recommend getting a coach. I highly recommend doing the peer group through CMU or anywhere else, because it's nice to have other people who are going through similar challenges where you can talk about things in a way that people understand that people outside the family business world may not quite get there.
This will be our last question.
Okay. Hi. First of all, thank you very much for coming here today. This is really a treat. I have something in common with both of you, actually, but I don't want to go into that now. But my question is, do you envision doing business in Pittsburgh?
No.
No.
Okay. Have you heard of Schuylkill River Passenger Rail Authority?
Yes.
Okay. But you don't want to work with them?
That's not Pittsburgh. Schuylkill River is Philadelphia.
Well, it could be Pittsburgh.
I'll just say, Pittsburgh's problem is too much money. Everybody's got an agenda. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Final question, I swear. It doesn't seem like there's much of an option for railroad in Pittsburgh. And basically, it seems like my son used to go to Georgetown, and it seems like the trains that would run to Washington, D.C. Nothing ran to Philadelphia. And, you know, it's really now your option to get to Philadelphia or New York is the Pennsylvania Turnpike or Route 80, you know.
Okay, well, let's go down that rabbit hole after we're done. I'll give you some very specific travel advice.
Okay, sounds good. But yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to answer all of our questions. We all got some really great insights from this session. So, you know, thank you very much. And with that, I would like to hand over the session to Professor Emeritus Grelli.
Let's give everyone a nice Thank you again to the Posner family for everything you continue to do for Carnegie Mellon University. We truly would not be the university we are without your family and your engagement here. So thank you, including for today. Let's give another round of applause to the Posners. And how about for our moderator, Shreyas? Great job. Okay, some important quick notes for you. So thank you as well to our sponsors of the Family Business Initiative, in particular BNY, who is an incredible partner of our university as well. And I know we have some friends from BNY here with us today. Thank you for being here and for your support. Also, Gemini Food Corporation, a family firm founded by one of our Tepper alums, as well as Swank Construction, another family firm run by one of our Tepper alums who is building bridges in Pittsburgh. And finally, final note, we had, because Ida was here today, and because Ida is making the world better through her valiant campaign against food waste, we were very conservative in our ordering today. But I know there were a handful of you that came in towards the end that did not get a boxed lunch. The incredible Swartz team went downstairs and grabbed some more sandwiches. If you did not get a lunch, please help yourself to a sandwich on the way out. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. We look forward to seeing you in March for our next Family Business Leadership Series talk. All right, have a great day.